we know why Tailmon had to Naruto run because we know that the Faga is occupied by a bunch of Vetamon, the Vetamon cult, and we know that Tailmon has to Naruto run to Area 51 to get to the aliens. So
Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on.
Run. Welcome to Podagist, your friendly 8-legged dog bus companion to the 2020 Digimon Adventure reboot. This week we're discussing episode 34, Hikari and Tailmon. I'm your host, Jeff Ruberg, and I'm excited to welcome back Chris Farris, who covered, now past tense, the Digimon reboot on Anime News Network until a couple weeks ago. Thanks for coming back on the show, Chris. How's it going?
It's going great, Jeff. Thanks for having me again. Happy to be here.
Is the world a brighter, light-filled world now that you're not writing about Digimon week to week?
I'm not gonna say it was like. I'm still watching it, so that's the thing. And obviously, it's funny. Just here we are, 2 weeks later, and I'm over here analyzing it, albeit in a different format again. So I'm not gonna. I'm still watching it. I'm still doing plenty of writing, although the shows I'm reviewing this season compared to Digimon, I'm enjoying. I will say at this point significantly more than I'd gotten to be enjoying Digimon at that point. But whether things are better or worse, I don't know if I can heap all the blame on Digimon for that.
So it's been, you were last on the show, episode 21 for, what was going on? Oh, that was Metal Greymon getting the upgrade Alterous mode?
Yeah, the Alterous mode episode, yeah.
So how have you felt about the show in general, people who haven't been reading your reviews?
It was funny because we were talking about one of the big reasons we kind of came away generally positive about that episode was because at the time it was a big surprise. The show had really managed to throw us for a loop, kind of shock us. And immediately after that, it settled right back into kind of a formulaic rut like it had been again. And we didn't have that again until just the last couple of episodes where we got another kind of surprising evolution, the whole Patamon turning into Pegasmon thing. And then just recently with the last episode, even though I know a lot of people had predicted it, but it was still something of a swerve, a twist, which was Tailmon being inside of Dark Knightmon. So I do feel like it's just a couple of peaks I've managed to hit here, because in between the Greymon Alterous mode episode and this one and the last couple of them, I feel like the show kind of settled into the same issues it was having before that as well.
Yeah, it's weird because the thing that we were talking about as being like a rut pre-episode 21 was like so many evolutions jam-packed, and it was like, okay, give us some time to breathe. And then I feel like the rut we had after episode 21 was like everything being Taichi and Yamato, only the two of them, no one else mattered, no one else was on screen, and there weren't that many evolutions, or like, so it's weird how like they were like completely different ruts.
I do feel like it wasn't even, speaking frankly, I feel like it wasn't even worse rut after that, because like you said, yeah, we went straight into just the Taichi and Yamato show and then just the Taichi show for a while. And I feel like that stretch of Taichi episodes, it was only like 2 or 3 in the grand scheme of things, but they still fit into that same structure of just basically no time to breathe, nonstop fighting, because that's all they could think to do. And I know that I wasn't the only one feeling that way, because that was, I think, the place where I feel like I saw the majority of comments online about how exhausting the pacing of the show had become at that point.
Yeah, like that rut after episode 21,
Mm-hmm.
since you were last on, I feel like made what we initially labeled as a rut before episode 21 look so much brighter. It was like, oh wait, that we still got characterization, and we got
I'll take the Ultimate Evolution arc over the one we got after that, just because there were gestures at characterization still at that point, and some new old evolutions to, at least keep the presence of power changes and momentum as far as like gimmicks and toy sales and stuff like that up. Whereas after that, it just became just so much more pronounced as this kind of droning, nonstop. I'm not going to say. I think the show's been compared to Frontier more times in the past, usually unfavorably, and by me a couple of times, as a matter of fact. And this is where I think it hit the most of some of that most unfavorable parts of Frontier, where it's just the same thing over and over, focusing on the same cut down characters who get to be in the spotlight every time.
Yeah, it's kind of like that stretch of Frontier where it's just they're fighting the same enemies each week, and it's the same always Takuya and Koji.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's not quite. I mean, there's at least new enemies this time, but it's just there's nothing to the enemies other than big scary monster shows up. They fight them. They win. Yeah, and I did feel like that. The last episode I ever reviewed was kind of along that same line, just with a couple of change ups, namely the uh, Patamon Pegasmon episode. And then after that, just for the past couple of episodes, I do think not to not to jinx things again, but it does seem like there was just it's changed the structure up a little bit. I think it still has a lot of the same issues as far as characterization and focus on evolution and power levels more than actual building the world as much as it thinks it does and developing any of these characters who are powering that. But it's at least they've got enough characters in the current cast we're focusing on, and the structure of the Digimon interactions and fights and everything, just for the past couple episodes, has been a little bit lifted the past couple of episodes.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like it's lifted just enough for me to be like, is this indicative of a new trend for the show, or is it a minor peak that like we're about to fall down away from, and I don't know how much to get my hopes up?
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, not to get to the end of the episode already here, but we're coming up on another, and I don't know when it's going to happen, just due to the way the show is currently structured. But we are coming up on another big boss battle sooner rather than later here, and the show has a really weird ongoing relationship with that structure. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah. So for people who aren't fully aware of like the ANN weekly review structure, can you talk a little bit about like you didn't just like stop the ANN reviews because you were like, I'm sick of Digimon. Like,
They might have gotten that impression as my reviews had gone on, and I'll talk about that in a second, actually, because for those who aren't aware, Anime News Network, when we're setting up the weekly reviews, it goes on a season by season basis, and every season after the main crop of new seasonal shows is premiered, they put up a poll for people to vote on which shows they want to see covered in weekly reviews this season, and that does include ongoing shows that have carried over, be they ones that have just a second core or long running ones that have continued. So shows like, things like One Piece and Black Clover, and in this case, Digimon. And it had been carried over for a couple of seasons now, but it did not. Apparently, they don't make the voting numbers public. To editorial doesn't make the voting numbers public, even to the freelancers who write like me. But apparently, Digimon did not get enough votes to merit continuing. So instead, I wrote a send off to it with my episode 32 review, and yeah, that was that. I'm covering a completely new batch of shows now, and like I was kind of alluding to, I feel like maybe, I mean, without knowing where we've gone in the past couple of episodes and where the show's going to go since, I feel like that might have been for the best at the time, because I had felt, just due to the nature of the show, the structures we talked about just now, its problems and the pacing therein had become so samey to kind of try and discuss week after week. When you've got the show that abides by this formula and does have issues, but they're kind of the same issues week to week, it becomes difficult to talk about in what I felt was an interesting way writing was. So I mean, I was definitely getting burnt out on writing about it. I'll just say that, just due to the nature of the show. So I'm not, yeah, I'm not going to shed any tears that I didn't get voted in to continue. And I do tentatively plan on, I'm going to continue following the show, and I do kind of think I am thinking about writing up seasonal reviews for the next couple cores that the show has left in it, depending on how the batches of episodes work out.
cool, cool. Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like the people who are watching now are the dedicated Digimon fans. Like it's gotten narrower and narrower now. It's like the people who are like on the fence and like, oh, maybe I should check out this new Digimon thing. I haven't watched Digimon in like decades. Maybe I should check out the new Digimon thing. Have mostly fallen off and are like,
Yeah, I
uh,
mean,
so
you tuned in to see where it's going, and you've either decided you are interested enough in where it's going that you're going to follow it all the way to the end, or you're just going to step off and maybe watch from afar, see what other people are saying. I mean, actually, I wonder if someone will come up and do one of those things that after the show's ended, they put together kind of like a list of, okay, here's the episodes you should watch and the ones you can just go ahead and skip.
yeah, I generally like dislike those lists, but I realized recently that like I think those lists could be useful for the show if they're like personalized to someone's tastes. Like if you like this kind of relationship, okay, it skips through like half of the episodes. But
Yeah.
then there are some episodes in the show that I'm like, who would whose list would this actually show up on this episode?
Some of these are. I wrote. I'm writing 1,000 plus word reviews on these things every week, and if I recognize that some of these things could do with a few sentence synopsis bar actual discussion, and I mean, sure, get not to discount the value of coming on a podcast and talking about it, to be sure, but sorry, maybe I've got more burnout on the series lurking beneath her now that I've scratched the surface than I thought I did. Sorry to rant, everybody.
Yeah, I also feel like I saw people when I guess it was the first poll in the first couple of polls, like when Digimon was up for like in those ANN polls of like which
Hmm.
shows should be covered in the season. I saw a lot more like rallying behind like, come on, everyone, go vote. Make like, wouldn't it be cool if News Network covers it? And
Hmm.
for like recently, last couple ones, I don't think I saw the Digimon fans rallying so much for it. So it's
Oh
like,
yeah, so like there were a few people in the forums afterwards who were disappointed it didn't make it in, but obviously that doesn't speak for the majority of people who didn't vote for it or just didn't even think to vote for it when they were voting.
yeah, I think like I personally, I remember like when the show first premiered, I was like, had so much ambition that it could like blow up the Digimon fandom into this huge thing again. Like,
Oh yeah.
and I feel like it has to some degree, but it's not that like thing that's gonna be for everyone. So it's like,
Like you said, it feels more like it's settled into we're definitely settled into the people who are still watching it by now.
yeah, yeah. All right, let's jump on a
Yeah.
Commandamon and dive into this week's episode 34, Hikari and Tailmon, aka One Punch Cat, aka The Cat Returns, aka Hikari's Catfish Adventure. Uh, So, spoiler policy for this week. Like always, we'll be talking about everything in the Crunchyroll episode, which includes the title and preview for next week.
Not only just not only the preview, but the Digimon Encyclopedia this episode absolutely give away the game for next episode.
Yeah, I had known that title from before because it was actually the last of the batch of titles that had been announced in Japan. But then the Digimon Analyzer like spoiled it before that, and I'm like, oop, that's not the right order. But yeah, and we'll also potentially be spoiling everything in the original Adventure season. But if we talk about any other seasons of Digimon, we'll give you a fair warning. Also, we can't talk about any titles or synopses or anything beyond next week because they haven't come out as far as I know. So.
Mm. Oh yeah, I just thought about that. We're definitely just as of like last episode, we're into the part of this show where it's really hard to talk about without at least just nonchalantly spoiling some base stuff about about the original adventure. That's a good point.
Right, right. It's like, oh, well, Angel, like as soon as you say Wizardmon, then it's like, oops, that's a big spoiler. But yeah, so quick recap of this episode. The gang rides a Commandamon through, or rides their Commandamon through the desert, and they jump into the water. Tailmon starts to explain what Faga is. Commandamon falls out of a sea current, crashes into a dome city thing. Tailmon fights some Manbomon cops, but then defends them from attacking Manta Raymon. Marine Angemon invites them to stay at the castle. Marine Angemon moves the city to get away from the impending Digimon they're attacking, but they get attacked by an Anomalocrymon on the way, and Tailmon tries to take down the Anomalocrymon on her own until Hikari rides Metalgreymon to go after her and has an emotional moment with her, gets a Digivice, and then Tailmon punches harder and defeats the Anomalocrymon, and then the gang rides off on the current again. So yeah, that was an episode. Chris, what were your general impressions on this episode?
I think first of all, my major takeaway was just a real. And I already, sorry, I already complained at length about the structural issues of the previous chunk of the show we were in. So compared to that, this one was just kind of a relief to be more along that almost vintage Digimon anime style of wind up in an area, maybe have an initial misunderstanding with a fight, but then settle in and have a almost cordial, staying with some Digimon in a friendly way relationship for a little while. There's a little established world building, showing all the different facets of the monsters and creatures that live in this world, and then those ones get attacked by some sort of threat, which leads to the major conflict of the episode and the growth of the characters involved therein. There's like it was it feels like it's been so long since we had an episode of the show that had a noticeable 3-act structure. And this basic layout of it was just a real relief to see, and it reminded me of what I thought one of the cool aspects of Digimon in general as a series back in the previous shows that hooked me in when I watched those older shows, which is just I mean, I'm not a big focus person on world building or anything like that, but in a series like this, I like that aspect of showing me all the weird and wild sights of these creatures and their societies and where they live. And this was a good episode. I mean, they live in a Waymon skeleton with like an air bubble, a glass bubble or something over it, because there's still land Digimon that are still evolved to kind of be living underwater, but they have conflicts with the sea Digimon on account of the fact that they're not natural, stuff like that, and they go into it. It kept my interest more than hitting the ground running with some kind of nonstop fight and just carrying that all the way through.
Yeah, like you mentioned that it is very similar to that old school, like what we think of a Digimon structure being. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think it really did that in spades. It was fun, it was colorful. There was that basic world building stuff, but even on top of the world building stuff, there was character conflict that I want to say makes sense, but I have my issues with it. We'll get to that.
Oh yeah, I mean, as far as the characterization stuff, that's still something I'm that's gonna need to be talked about. But like, I mean, there's just little things like you have like the Mambomon are the cops, so their boxing gloves light and flash to be sirens, and you got like Sihomon that are acting as like the air raid warden sirens. That's just cool little things like that. One of my favorite ones in the show was the was Daipenmon
Oh yeah, yeah.
being this big guy in the middle, and he's got his. They have him using his ice cream pops as the flippers that move the city around. That's really cool.
Yeah, it actually feels like someone looked at all these Digimon designs that exist and was like, how can we use them in fun and interesting ways that fit with their designs? And
Yeah.
it's so weird to see like it's like we had like a complete drought for like 30 episodes, and then it's like bam, all in this one episode. It's like why all the creativity is in this one episode? Like what?
When I first watched, I mean, there's been crowds of Digimon in the previous episodes, but this was one where I kept going like, oh, there's a Mandarimon, and oh, Daipenmon is here. But there was like names and guys showing up on screen like every few seconds, and they weren't just crowd fillers. They were, like you said, they put them in places and used them for things as like scenery and society building and stuff. It was wild.
And I one thing it makes me realize though is like in terms of NPC Digimon that have appeared in the show to flesh out the world, I feel like 99% of them are in this episode. like if you were to imagine like if episode 35 was the finale, which it's obviously not, but like
Mhm.
if it were and like all of the Digimon they've helped throughout the series showed up to like help them out in the final battle or something, 99% of them would be from this episode. Like the other ones we've seen have been like a Leomon and his like three companions and like three other Digimon he was protecting, but we never actually saw them interact. And it's like I mean we've seen crowds of like those Mamamon that blew up, but like those are enemies and they killed them all. um I really can't think of any other like groups.
Yeah, this is the first time. There's been like little groups, like the Woodmon in the forest. I
Oh
think
yeah,
this
the
is the.
Woodmon in the forest. Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I seriously, I mean, I could be wrong. I've been watching the show for 30 plus episodes, and it's been half a year. But I swear the last time we saw like an actual something approaching like a society like this was the Tanamon village way back in
Yeah.
Mimi's episode. Unless you want to count like there's hostile ones like the fortress in a few episodes later and things like that. But other than that, it's been like forest, fake virtual reality city with like one bad guy in it, sky full of Mamemon. We haven't seen. They were tripping over villages and little settlements and stuff all over the place in older shows, and this is the first time we've seen something just of this scale in this
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like this episode is like so classic. Like you were saying about like
one.
them just like sleeping overnight and like
Yeah.
it reminds me of so many. Like I'm thinking of like I guess this one's a little more complicated, but like that like Koromon village they found in the original show, but it was actually
Hmm.
not a Koromon village. They've been taken over by those other guys. I don't remember their name.
Yeah. The Gazimon.
Yeah, yeah,
That, I mean, even it was a little different, but it still kind of played on the same idea that, like, okay, you've got these different societies of Digimon, and they maybe don't get along. There's struggles between different groups here, and that's still a societal thing that went into, and we saw there was a fair amount of stuff like that in the original adventure. And this one has that too, where like they basically, hey, our ancestors moved here, but we're still basically the new guys underwater, and that means the other actual underwater Digimon don't like us, and it leads to this conflict, and that's the reason why we can and do move the city sometimes. So
I am pretty confused though. This isn't actually a complaint about the episode. I think it's just funny that like so you mentioned like the bubble inside
mhm,
the Waymon skeleton is air, right? Because they're
mhm,
originally from land and they've
yeah.
only like recently adapted to living in the sea. But like then there are among them fish that fly through the air, and so it's like, are you? I kept wondering at times like, are they in air or water? I guess it's air because the kids are there.
Yeah, when I first was watching it, I was like, are they underwater? The kids seem to be okay. And I mean, I think that this came up when I was on here the last time too, which is that fish Digimon who fly is nothing new.
Yeah, that's true.
They do that a fair amount. So I don't know if it just means, I don't know if they're still working on being adapted to the water, but they're handling it better than most. Except Commandomon seems to have no problem with water, and he makes his own air bubble. So
Yeah, that was I was a little bit frustrated by that how that sequence played out where they dive into the water because it's like,
very clearly, this is where we need to go next, and this is the only way we can think to get down there.
well, like they could have been like one line of like Hikari or Tailmon translating for Kamanon and saying like, okay, we're gonna be bubble, everyone get in. But instead, it's just like we're jumping in water, and it's like they're gonna die. Okay, they're okay. Okay, like, but it was fun. It's like it's a nice. It did make you wonder like why don't they just go inside? Like they don't doesn't need to this magic bubble around Commandamon. They could go. Commandamon has an interior. They
There's
could just sit
yeah, there's an
inside.
interior below deck. I don't know if whoever did this one forgot about it, or they needed to ease us into the idea of the big air bubble in the city by showing us a small air bubble around a dog.
That's yeah, it's true.
You gotta bring the audience on these things, and if Digimon Adventure 2020 is about anything, it's about very very slowly easing the audience into its story structures.
Getting to the big character conflict this episode, we get to see a lot more characterization of Tailmon. Really, I was gonna say Hikari, but then
Mm.
really all Hikari does the whole episode is hug Tailmon. um,
I am so. I've had this problem since the beginning because as far back as her first appearance, Hikari has been so irritatingly light on characterization in this iteration of the story that it's just I don't know. Like, I mean, I feel like Hikari could be kind of an inscrutable character back in the old series, but she still did have uh, personality. She had quirks. Uh, she had dialogue before last couple episodes she was in. Whereas in this one, uh, this goes back to the for episode well like the first couple episodes where she wound up in the digital world, and all she was really doing was just staring out into space, to the point where they have Taichi have a line where he just kind of goes, yeah, she's always been like that, classic Hikari.
well, they explain that this episode because apparently she's always been being called by Tailmon, and
That's a
I
lot.
guess
Like, can you imagine just entire life whole time just been standing there, hearing her name called? Does she do and I'm going in circles again about the problems with the characterization of Hikari, both in this episode and throughout the series, which is that she hasn't had anything, even since before Tailmon showed up, as she feels an important drive to be uh, at this thing. At the time, we didn't know I mean, we could guess it was Tailmon. Now we know it's Tailmon. She wants to be with Tailmon. She wants to help her. She wants to hug her. And, like, that's it. We don't get. She doesn't even have like a nominal kind of explanation of wanting to save their world or the digital world, really, the same way the other kids have. It's just very much she wants to be with Tailmon and she wants to help her, and that's the big explanation we get this episode that passes for an explanation, which is, well, she's always felt that way and she's always felt it, and that's just what she has to do.
yeah, it's like some aspects of that characterization, that minimal characterization she has, I feel like are excusable to make someone like, okay, she's an 8-year-old. Like an eight, sometimes 8-year-olds don't have that complex of a characterization. Like, but I think the thing that's missing that the original show had in spades is just like her relationship with Taichi feeling real and like there was actually something there. And this version, I'm like, I cannot picture the two of like Taichi and Akari's relationship outside of this show, outside of like the scenarios that we've seen explicitly on screen. I have no idea how the two of them would act because
Well, I mean, you talk about it's the thing. You talk about how all Hikari does is basically hug Tailmon and try and stick close to Tailmon to hug her this episode, and then you think about like that a few episodes, several episodes ago actually, where Taichi was basically just treating, now since Hikari was in there but didn't have a partner, didn't have a Digivice, wasn't doing anything, and he was basically just treating her as like this secondary kind of just pack object that he had to carry around and protect. I always think of that scene where he just throws her at Koshiro and goes, "Here, hold Hikari," before he jumps off into a battle. Because I mean, I think we talked last time too, and it's been discussed as well, that Yamato and Takeru's relationship in this show isn't the most intimately defined either, but they at least got a little bit of rapport and like some nominal indications of, especially just in a couple episodes. I didn't think it was particularly strong, but they at least put it out there that, oh, Yamato's thing now is that he's having to come to terms with Takeru being out on his own and maybe growing up a little bit. So there's nods there, is what I'm saying, and I'm not getting any of that with anything between Hikari and Taichi so far.
Yeah, I do. On a more positive note, I do really love. I almost said love, and then I hesitated and said like and love in one word. But I do really like Tailmon's characterization as this like. Unlike Patamon, she seems to have retained like not all, but most of her memories and everything. And so she is a cat on a mission. She knows exactly what she needs to do and is like so hard set on doing it to her detriment. And I appreciate that like there's finally a character that is kind of like no nonsense and is just like I want to get things done. We have a mission to do.
Well, that's something I've always thought was that's a carryover of something I always appreciate about Tailmon's characterization going back to the old series. It's something that's definitely, I would almost say they're deliberately doing the same thing here, where she's definitely the grown up of the partner Digimon,
Mm-hmm.
and that's always been a neat aspect of her characterization compared to the others.
I was speculating last week about how like the show has not given us an answer yet to why Tailmon is champion and the others aren't. And I don't. I guess since they haven't answered yet, I'm going to assume that it's just the same way that Angemon was reverted back. Patamon was reverted back to Angemon before he kind of appeared and then got turned into an egg.
As far as like a personality level, though, I go back to that idea of her being the adult in the room and that thing she says, and I do think she was kind of fulfilling that role this episode. We'll see how it uh, plays out, but she has that line in this episode where she declares herself the leader of the destined
Mm-hmm.
Digimon team that they're doing, and I really I enjoyed that aspect a lot. Again, I don't know if they're going to continue with it or if Taichi will overtake things as we go on for next few episodes, but there definitely was that sense just in this one, even though she barely showed up last episode, that now she's stepped up, she's calling the shots, she's talking to Commandomon, she's speaking for them when they're talking to Marine Angemon, she's trying to lead, and that's what leads to her jumping in and everyone else following her in a reconciliation with Hikari this episode. That, at least for this episode, was a neat aspect that I thought they played up well.
Yeah, it'll be really curious to see if like does her having the leadership role, does it only extend to this like mini arc focusing on her character, and then once she gets to Angelwoman and is not like the focus character anymore, will it just be like, okay, I'm passing the torch to Taichi, and now like she's just guiding them as like a navigator or something?
Well, yeah, and the show has had problems with that in the past. Gosh, I still think about, remember when Mimi first showed up in her first episode and she had like this tactician kind of battle leadership thing going on that just never showed up again in the series.
I can't even remember that far back.
Yes,
Like the
yes.
hopes and dreams we had back then have faded away.
Well, that's the thing. I was talking about the early character episodes. Actually, does kind of feed into my kind of my other problem I've had with Hikari in this show so far, which is that at least when we got those early characterization episodes, at the time we had no way of knowing that those were going to be some of the only focus episodes these characters got, and it was just really nice to have Digimon introducing these characters on a single episode per character basis,
Mm-hmm.
so we got to see them really shine and get focused right out of the gate. Whereas Hikari didn't get that. She was just kind of shunted in here along with the others when they came back and landed there in Taichi's lap before being spirited away as a plot device. And so she didn't get that initial batch of like really showing off her character and giving any nominal growth at the beginning. Even in the previous episode where she got Tailmon out, it was all entirely laser focused on that. Well, someone's calling me. I'm going to go get her. This kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're. I guess I'm kind of still holding on to see if like maybe we get something just a little more dense character work with Hikari, but not bated breath here.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense for an episode about Angelomon. Hopefully, that is like if we get to that Angelomon evolution, it's not all just Tailmon growth. It's some Hikari growth too.
Because yeah, I mean, because I am liking what they're doing with Tailmon, and if they're gonna keep going that way, I can at least trust them to do it well, and it works because Tailmon's always been one of the more, definitely just one of the more well-rounded, I'd say, personality-wise partner Digimon, just because you, both in this series and the original one, even though they're very different circumstances, they have similar kinds of baggage powering their characterization, and that just automatically makes them a little more robust and interesting than the others, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as I love that like characterization of Tailmon in the original show, so
Hmm.
much of it is abandoned once that arc is over, and then it's just like in that final stretch of adventure, I feel like Tailmon completely falls to the background, and then in Zero Two, even more so, like Tailmon's just like part of the gang.
There's a lot you could say about some of the characterizations that fall off in Zero Two, and Tailmon kind of dipping into being more of a just standard partner Digimon in a show that already didn't give us a ton of personality for the partner Digimon doesn't. Yeah, that definitely speaks to the issues that one had.
But yeah, so it would be nice to not to get my hopes up too high, but like that could be something this show actually handles better than the original show.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like I said, I like what they're doing with her so far.
Yeah, yeah. But I think the thing that really frustrates me about because I really liked the how Tailmon acted throughout this episode, but what really frustrates me about the central Hikari Tailmon conflict is how Tailmon is jumping into battle
Mhm.
constantly and is like maybe too much rushing to battle at risk of her own safety because she's so stressed out about like needing to go get to Faga right away, whatever.
Yeah.
And that okay, that will be understandable like thing to learn, and she needs to hold back and work with the team. But instead, it becomes more about how Hikari wants to join the battle, and she's like, "No, stay back." And the lesson they learn in the end is that, like, yes, Hikari should join the battle. And I'm like, no, it's
Yeah, and that bit is like, and yeah, that's one of the things watching the episode is really that was really needing to be talked about because it's something I feel like has been danced around and we've joked about it before and everything, but now it's just shunting this elephant straight into the front of the room, which is the whole thing in this show of the kids riding the Digimon and being next to them in battle and yeah, being like right there on the front lines participating. And the big old question of why?
well, it's just so weird when like finally we get a character who's speaking reason and is being rational about this, and the show is like, you're wrong for that. You're wrong for having reason and rationality. Uh,
Maybe the 8-year-old doesn't need to be standing as an even larger target than the cat right up in front. Tailmon, your paws are super short. You could barely reach anyway. Hikari's gonna have to stand so close to the enemy for you to do this. She can't even
yeah.
ride on you.
Right, like there's no riding that can even happen. Maybe with Angelwoman, if Angelwoman is huge, she can ride her like she does in the Revenge of G. movie. But
This is why, and this is why if anything, this is why they'll go to Nefertimon. Oh my god, is this why they did? Is this why they switched Patamon to Pegasmon? Because it's easier to have Takeru riding him
yeah,
when he's a horse. And it's like, I don't know, I go back and forth on this. When it first started, it was something like way back at the beginning of the show. I was actually kind of for it because the original Digimon series, Digimon Adventure, had kind of that thing where the kids are the nominal focal characters and they're supposed to be helping the Digimon. You get that, but just when the fighting starts, they don't really do anything. They very pointedly stand on the sidelines and just act as cheerleaders. Where in this, they're still basically doing that same thing. There were, again, in the earlier episodes when things were more well thought out, maybe you'd see them like strategizing or like doing little interactions and stuff, whereas now they are just basically straight up riding on there and not doing anything except letting their digivices glow. But they've committed to that as the way that they interact with and participate in the battles. So you have to have this whole episode set up around including Hikari in that, even though, as you say, that makes no sense at this stage.
the whole cheerleader thing is one of those things that like it's kind of like it's the show's job to make you not think about it. You know, like you're supposed to be so swept up in the moment that you don't think about how they're like just standing on the sidelines and cheering them on.
Right, being a fan of Digimon and watching as many episodes of seasons as I did, especially the first two, you do just eventually get used to it as a thing the
Yeah,
show does. But then you step back and you think about it, and it's something I feel like people who maybe only watched a few episodes might complain about, and it definitely feels like something that this show did what they did with the kids as a way to address.
yeah, it definitely feels like it's like, oh, it'd be cool and fun to have them riding the Digimon, and
Hmm.
now we've gotten to the big problem of a Digimon who can't do that.
The one who's
And
the actual size of a house cat.
yeah, I guess that's one big change too, that they've made her much smaller than I remember Gatomon being in the original show. Not much smaller, but like small enough for like.
Or Hikari is larger.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Her size actually fluctuated a little bit. I was noticing, like, there's one scene where she brings her into snuggle uh, um, by the Commando-mon, and Tailmon's just absolutely teeny there for like a couple of frames.
Yeah, I guess our conversation has pivoted into being much more critical and negative, but
I'm trying to like talking about. I talked about the things I liked, which is the society and the use of civilian Digimon this time, and the direction so far that they've started going with Tailmon. But yeah, if you want to discuss like the central idea of the episode, it is one that I don't know, honestly invites criticism just because they make you think about something that was already kind of a weird aspect of the show, and now you can't ignore it because they're making it a major point of this one's plot and development.
yeah, it's the kind of thing that like it's all fictional, it's all fantasy, it's all magic that's happening on screen, right? So like
Hmm.
I feel like on some level it's like okay, you should just accept that this is a magical world where as much as it like defies reason, Taichi riding on Greymon's head is actually fine and safe, and in this world's logic, it's actually rational.
It's cool. Kids want to imagine riding on Greymon. I get that. It's still, when they it's just when they do call attention to the fact that no, it is actually dangerous for Hikari to be there, um, regardless of how she can fight alongside Tailmon. I mean, I think it'd be very cool if Hikari just starts throwing hands like Masaru from Digimon Savers, but somehow I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Maybe like Tailmon will take off like that one scene in the original show where she like takes off her gloves. She'll
Oh
give the
yeah,
gloves to Hikari, and then Hikari will slash with the nails. And
the Tailmon will ride on her. Okay, there we go.
but yeah, no, it's like it's one thing to accept that this is like a magical reality where the rules of safety are different. But then once they talk about it in the text, not
Exactly.
subtext anymore, but just the text of the show, then it's like now there's going to be a ton of people who, when it was subtext, found it okay and acceptable, are going to be like, well, that logic is silly and stupid. Like,
Tailmon's like, no, Hikari, it's too dangerous. And I'm like, yes, yes, it is. Good. The cat is the voice of reason, especially when they've already characterized Tailmon as the smart adult in the room who acts as the voice of reason.
yeah, it's kind of like I actually found it like reasonable when Taichi was jumping in and like fighting rookie level Digimon
Yeah.
a little bit. Like that was fun and fit. But it's I mean, Hikari jumping in and trying to like stand on the Anomalous Karimon is very different from that. So let's get into some through reviews. First off, from at Uwamon08, where is Yamato? Good question.
Still running. I feel like he's been the character that we've seen doing the least in whatever situation he's in. Like, Takara was just kind of wandering across the field, but he got picked up by Taichi and Sora relatively quickly. And Joe and Mimi obviously have had their own little mini adventures going on. Koshiro got over his seemingly pretty quickly, but he keeps checking in for the weekly Zoom calls, so that's kind of his thing. But yeah, Yamato's just kind of charging along.
Yeah, yeah.
CC Takado says, "Where is Mimi?" We didn't see her this episode, which is too bad because she had like, even though it was like 2 seconds long, the best scene of the episode in the previous week.
Yeah. Well, now I'm disappointed that no one wrote in saying, where is Joe? Because
We know
poor
where
Joe.
Joe is. It's still in the bath.
Yeah. Well, at Yuki Desu, 4 children only. And, yep, that's the maximum limit they can fit in the Commandamon.
At Dot Yawning says, "No papi pupepo marine angemon."
Yeah, I don't remember what that's. I
Is
think,
that
is that like
is that what
a.
the Japanese version of Marine Angemon did back in Tamers? Papipo. Gosh, it's been forever since I saw that part of Tamers.
It might be. I mean, because that a e u e o is the like the order of vowels in the
Yeah.
Japanese alphabet, so it's like that sounds like something that they would say in the Japanese version of like when Marianne was doing like the kiss healing thing, maybe.
Yeah.
But we're both too hazy on that to remember.
Makes me want to go back and rewatch Tamers.
Yeah. Well, at Empire Will said Waymon Husk City.
Yeah, like I said, that was one of my. I thought that was a really just cool little detail they threw in there. They could have made it just a regular bubble or something like that, but instead they go ahead and just make it a Waymon skeleton, which is a little macabre, but in that
Yeah,
same kind of sidelong way that the old show would get up to as well. So,
yeah. I don't want to think about whether they had to murder a Waymon to get into that, or if they just found it. They probably just found it.
wait, is there a skull Waymon? Could that just be a?
There should be.
I mean, probably. Um, at bored individual says a seafood smorgasbord. Oh, this is why the actual sea Digimon are hunting them. They've been dining on their brethren for generations.
Yep. On that note, at Mega Draymon 22 said Scorpiomon wanted clams. He wanted some of that smorgasbord.
You know what? Watching this whole episode, I was just thinking about if I was going to be able to make a joke about clams at some point in this podcast, and at Mega Draymon 22 has beaten me to it. The only thing I could do is say something to the effect of Tailmon smashing his chuckle-headed cockle shell. It's the Scorpio. I don't know if I really liked the episode or it was one I saw a lot, but the Scorpiomon episode from Adventure, the original Adventure, is one I vividly remember enjoying a lot from when I watched it the first time through. So just like all the little lines from that one, like clams and Metal Seedramon, you chuckle-headed cockle shell, and that faux Jack Nicholson thing he had going on. It was a fun time.
I always kind of wondered why there was that discrepancy with the names, like why they changed Anomalocrymon to Scorpiomon, and now having to say Anomalocrymon several times in an episode, I'm like, I never want to say Anomalocrymon again.
I
Please
kind
call
of
it Scorpiomon.
assumed that was the case, except we already had the real Scorpiomon show up way earlier in the
Right,
show.
right.
And at Golden Pelt says all-terrain Commandomon. Yes, he's up to the full Diddy Kong racing ability of movement. He can go into and underwater. Of course, he can go through water. Dog paddling. Come on.
Oh yeah, yeah. Dogs can do that. They have that big air bubble they can make when they go in water too. It's very, very
Total,
real.
very famous dog things.
At Ancient Irismon said Hikari and Tailmon! Exclamation point.
That's a 3-episode review of Hikari and Tailmon.
Yep.
I guess we should have been happy that the crack team of transliterators on this one didn't call it like the Light and Tailmon or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh no! At Thousand Lion says Hikari Tailmon OTP.
Hopefully not that kind of OTP. Hopefully just like friendly OTP.
It's just bro TP.
At Giga 22, Tailmon Naruto ran. I didn't notice that, but okay.
I think I remember that. Like there was a lot of. I mean, she used the same attack animation a few times, but Tailmon's always an interesting one to me because she's notably so small and has. They don't get to animate her in like the same broad, larger strokes the way they do the regular champion Digimon. They've always got to have her hopping around doing these little ninja moves and stuff like that.
Well, I think also we know why Tailmon had to Naruto run because we know that the Faga is occupied by a bunch of Vetamon, the Vetamon cult, and we know that Tailmon has to Naruto run to Area 51 to get to the aliens. So
Oh my gosh! I hope if Naruto runs in the episode where they get to the Faga, that's going to be. If that meme is not dead by then yes, have some fun with that one, kids. um, at Drew Softman says Tailmon under pressure.
Yep.
That's what they would title this episode in the American TV airing dub episode. That's what it would be called.
Do. I agree.
But they had a whole episode in season 4 that was just called Ice Ice Baby. Come on.
Yeah, I think one of the ones with Metal Seedramon was called Under Pressure. I think.
Oh, actually, I think you're right.
Well, at Dak and Jaxer said Gatomon unintentional catfishing.
Uh...
Yep. I struggled so much like when I was thinking of the things that titles I do with the opening of the show was like there's a cat and there's fish. I need to make a joke about this somehow. Like, come on, catfishing, that's an internet thing, that's technology. And I couldn't do it.
And speaking of, at Andy Lucas OE says typical feline attitude. I mean, besides killing fish, he's being very aloof to Hikari. You know, when you try and hug your cat and they're just not in the mood.
Yeah, they captured that dynamic. Like they gave characterization to Tailmon that made sense for her to react that way in the moment, and in doing that, perfectly captured cats being hugged. So like that they nailed really well.
Especially when you've got a new cat and it's still getting acclimated to you and
Yeah.
you want to be friends with it.
Totally. At Jshon26, best cat mom.
Yeah, see, Hikari knows. So we about Hikari's characterization. She definitely knows how to just wear down a cat's resistance and get her to warm up to her. At Lucas Quucus, Tailmon is tiny. We were talking about that. Like, so I only noticed in a couple of scenes, but you might be right. Just overall, Tailmon's just smaller than she was previously. More standard cat size, maybe.
No, I think you're right that the size varies scene to scene because I don't think the most consistent with that scene to scene. At Joseph Snosif, sweet water level. Yep, this is basically the the necessary water level.
Except it is a sweet one. It's actually one of the most interesting levels we've seen so far. As a setting, it's great. As emphasized by at pastelmon_art here, who reiterates that point. So many Digimon.
And on a little bit less positive note, at Warp Vector, mostly an episode. That's I wrote that down as a neutral one, but that's
It's like I said, as we've covered, there's a lot of good to say about this one, but then a lot of complaints that I think are kind of the same complaints that are the most broad ones about the show so far, which is limited characterization for people, even in what's nominally a focus episode, kind of inconsistent portrayal of how the action is supposed to work in powers and stuff like that. But mostly, there's lots of other good stuff too.
yeah. The more I think about it, the more I'm like worried about how much of that like creative energy was focused on this one episode. And I haven't looked into the staff credits list or anything, but I'm worried that it's like this episode was written by a completely different writer than that didn't work on any other episodes or something.
Well, I was thinking about that too, because I mean, like we were talking about, just the sheer imagination effort they put into coming up with this underwater city and all that stuff. This was clearly someone's idea. This was someone's project that they wanted to include in this episode, just for fun, basically. And like you said, it's hard to say if that same person's going to do anything, or anyone's going to come in with that same energy in the forthcoming episodes.
I'd be really curious to see more like behind the scenes interviews because I think a lot of the writers working on the series, they're not new to Digimon. A lot of them have worked on previous Digimon seasons that, like, so they're not like unfamiliar with the formula that we're looking for and stuff. So like it clearly is an intentional choice to veer away from that formula and to be more dry and unpopulated and not characterize villains, not characterize NPCs.
That's why it sticks out even more when you get an episode that does what this one did.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so moving into listener questions and comments, first comment came in from Dak and Jaxer, who said, terrific episode. It's nice to finally see a friendly Digimon society on this scale. I'm glad they're leaning into Gatumon's inherent maturity, a strong and welcome addition to the group dynamic. Keep this up, plus fairly distribute the screen time, and 2020 is back in business. And I agree, but I am, like I was just saying, I am worried this is a blip in the radar, and we'll be back to the regular programming tomorrow.
We've been burned on this same kind of getting our hopes up idea too many times in the past. Like, yeah, just the last time I was on here, we were talking about the Alterous mode episode, just in terms of surprising us with where the evolutionary levels and things could go, and it went right back into rut after this. And with this one, I do agree with this. If we get another episode right after this one that's like this, with a cool, interestingly designed and developed Digimon society, and leaning into character dynamics for characters that haven't been overexposed in the show so far, like Tailmon and her maturity and leader dynamic with the group, and maybe actually work in some other distribution of character screen time, then yeah, we would be in business. But all we can do is see at this point.
Yeah, I'm really surprised now looking at the polls that I put out on Twitter each week. The actual average rating for this episode is like almost exactly the same number as last week's average, which I find pretty surprising. And both of those are pretty significantly below the week before that, the Pegasus episode. I'm really surprised that I would expect a lot of people to like this episode more than the last week's episode where like Hikari first meets Tailmon.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking personally, I like this better than the past couple episodes. I like better than the Pegasus episode and the getting Tailmon from Dark Knightmon episode.
Yeah, I agree. Oh wait, one thing we haven't brought up, and is just the absurdity of last week. I don't know how you were feeling like watching last week's episode and stuff, but like
Honestly, I thought it was. I have my own opinions on there, but a lot of the feeling then are tainted by finally getting to watch an episode of Digimon without taking notes.
oh yeah. But like that episode of um even by the end of it, not knowing what was up with Tailmon, like if Tailmon was just an entity that was swallowed up and was sitting inside of Dark Knightmon, or if she actually was Dark Knightmon somehow.
I have been wondering about that, and that's kind of one reason I didn't bring it up, and I think this is where you're going because it looks like they might be addressing that next week.
Oh wait, did you watch? Did you pay attention to the recap at the beginning of the episode?
Well, the recap at the beginning of the episode did, yeah, seem to lay out that Tailmon was Dark Knightmon.
Okay, yeah, because like that was the most like the fact that they like spell that out explicitly for the first time in the recap, and I was like, what?
Some
That's
must have gotten some immediate feedback that people were not clear on that from the previous episode.
it makes me worry though that like I feel like that is more a sign that like that they didn't notice that it was unclear, or I don't know, because
Are we gonna have to like start having like major important plot and world building details doled out in the Digimon encyclopedia at the end of an episode later because they forgot?
yeah, well, what probably happened is it was like separate writers and staff handling two
Mm-hmm.
different episodes and like just a accident of coordination that like didn't quite line up perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess what you're saying with next episode preview, like they're probably going to make that explicit in the show itself.
Well, I guess what I was kind of getting at was less so the is was Tailmon Dark Knightmon, because yes, that was clarified here, but I'm more interested in the how of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm interested in I'm interested in what the story is there. We didn't get it all dumped out before, in the lead up to Tailmon remembering who she is and joining the group the way that they did back in Digimon Adventure, the original. Whereas in this one, it's still we know that she was, but we still don't know the full story and how that ties into what Millenniumon's currently doing, the Vetamon cult, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so next comment from at Thousand Lion. This is one of the best episodes of the series. Character development from the perspective of the Digimon. Hikari has an actual personality and active agency, which was more than she ever got in the original adventure. Can we just make the rest of the episodes about these two?
Okay, see, that's funny because as I've kind of expressed throughout this thing, I kind of feel like I hard disagree on that interpretation of Hikari, at least for this episode. I definitely feel like she's had less personality than she did previously, or at least I don't know. She's just so single-minded on this whole "my destiny is calling me" type thing. She has
Mhm.
active agency. I will agree with that. That's kind of a whole. That's the driving force of this episode, and almost honestly, okay, looking at it from that perspective, I can kind of appreciate uh, the episode, even though they kind of stumbled into a bunch of other issues in terms of the safety of the kids and how they actually contribute to battle and stuff like that. The idea of a character, especially like Hikari, who's regardless of the level of it, had this kind of problem throughout all of her appearances, specifically trying to assert her agency within the Digimon conflicts. I can kind of vibe with that as an idea, but still hard to disagree with how it was actually carried out in the episode.
Yeah, it seems like a fundamentally unsolvable problem because, like, yeah, I think we were saying it makes sense if she like wants to be more tactical or to like have a like I don't know to have more agency in battle. But like, how does a character in the Digimon world exert more agency in battle? I don't know.
Well, it's funny because this makes me think of something, and I guess spoiler policy. I don't know if you want to cut this out later, but this was something that came up in the later part of Digimon Adventure Try, which I was not a big fan of, but I did kind of like this part where Hikari basically goes, "No, screw it, I'm not letting this magical disembodied voice possess me and drive the
Mm-hmm.
plot anymore. Get the heck out," which was like kind of a really, especially after decades that Hikari had in terms of letting her agency be led around by these kind of things, was a really cool moment here. And I mean, this is a much more smaller scale version of that. And again, kind of still not sure about how it was handled. But from a conceptual standpoint, I can see the appreciation there. This Hikari starting off this early, being like, well, no, I want to do what I want to do in the conflict as we are now.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. It's nice that a valiant attempt to give her more agency, whether it comes out well or not.
I mean, I like that. I do appreciate that perspective on it, though. That's a good point.
Mm. So, onto some questions. First off, from Megadramon22. Oh wait, sorry, Megadramon. Because I think both the listeners, Mega Dramon and Giga Dramon 22 recently changed their handles to Mega Draymon and Giga Draymon, but which I did not notice at first. But anyway, Mega Draymon 22. When it comes to casting voice actors for minor roles, is it expensive to do so? Being told that Commandamon is speaking its own language is fun, but doesn't follow much logic. I know the original Dub Adventure had few people doing many voices. Would it really be a creative slash artistic choice that was made to have so many Digimon muted, speaking their own language or making weird noises like Vegemon did? I don't even remember Vegemon making noises. I remember making gestures.
It had kind of a little swish, swish, swish noise when they were zooming in. It was
Mm.
weird.
Mm. And they continue, maybe because Adventure 99 was a product of its time and it was easier to have voice actors spread thinner across the franchise, but I feel it diminishes the work of the writers when the world can't truly feel alive on screen. I remember playing as a kid trying to imitate Edamon, Cherrymon, and other baddies because they had fun characters slash voices and a presence that minor roles here are lacking. And now we've got no digital settlement that we struggle to connect with because the police fish can't talk and Scorpionmon doesn't talk. Sorry for the rant, but I'm curious if Chris, as an anime writer, also feels like the budget is suffocating emotional connections.
I can't speak to what the budget actually has to do with this. I do know that this is Toei, and they've, regardless of the schedule that is affecting the animation or anything like that, they definitely have mad money to throw around as far as casting voice actors and getting people to be associated with production in the role. I mean, you look at some of the various gets they have for things like Precure or to guest on as character voices and roles and things like Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. So I do think that if they wanted to get more voice actors or distinctive voice actors for the Digimon in this show, they 100% could. And seeing how the story has been told so far, which I wrote at length about, I mean, you talk about Vegemon, that was a really big kind of breaking point with me as far as the portrayal of the non-main Digimon in this show. It's definitely a stylistic choice that the main people running the show are going for. I feel like even more so as we've gotten onto this new continent they're on, where they were trying to portray a lot of the enemy Digimon and other ones as wild creatures and the whole eating and evolving thing. And I don't know if it's just a consistency thing or if this is just the way that they've fallen into writing them, because as was being described there, I thought of that was that we had Marine Angemon talking, of course, when they met her in the settlement, but then all of the other uh, Digimon that were around didn't have any speaking roles. And I was wowed by the presentation of the population of this thing here, but they don't really get to talk or interact with them. And that's a good point, because I can imagine, like, if this was in season 1 or 2 or even Tamers, that you'd have at least a few side characters like saying funny voices and making jokes and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's especially egregious when like Tailmon. When I think about it now, because I didn't really think about it at the
Mm-hmm.
time. But like when Tailmon tries to reason with the Mambomon, and
Mm-hmm.
like at first they don't understand, and they don't like it's like they can't converse. It's like why not?
They're speaking fish. They don't understand. Tailmon speaks Commandomon, not Mambomon.
Yeah. Um, and like you're saying, like because the Toei production, Toei certainly has the money and stuff to do it. But I think it's and we don't know what the like. It could be that if I were to guess, I would guess that it's a combination of stylistic choice and budget saving technique. That like, oh, if we go with the stylistic choice, then we also happen to save budget. Great, kill two birds with one stone. But like the thing that I find weird is that like I don't know the budget mechanics behind the scenes of how this all works with if having voice actors is expensive. And part of me would speculate that like maybe this is all more complicated to get lots of voice actors in COVID times.
That's a fair point.
But the thing is, like, I think like Japan has almost entirely opened up for that kind of production nowadays, and for the past several months. And other anime doesn't seem to have this problem. So it's like, especially looking at, like you mentioned, Toei, like looking at other Toei shows, they don't have this problem. Like Toei shows like Precure, like
The monsters of the week in Kira Major still talk plenty, and yet the baddies they fight week after week in Digimon are still just regular old non-talky growly guys.
yeah, like I think the and not to speculate too much on things that we have no idea about, but like what I think it indicates more to me is that Toei has less faith in this production than it does their other shows that are more like cash cows that they can do year in year out. And
Yeah, I do. I every now and then, because it's the simplest little aspect, because you do wonder how different the show would be if more of the civilian Digimon and certainly more of the enemy Digimon got to talk and have personalities and show off more of that agency and maybe communicate just how they feel about attacking these kids, why they're on the side of the bad guys, which was a big problem I had all the way back in like the Devamon arc that they just can't do because they aren't giving them voices in this one. Or even Commandomon, the goodest boy in the whole world. I wonder how, like, I like him as he is, but yeah, it might be, would it have been neat for him to have an actual voice and personality?
That is one character that I feel like there is an aspect of him that is heightened by him not being able to talk. Like he does seem
Mm-hmm.
more dog-like when he can't talk and communicate.
Right.
So
Well, in his case, it's more just thinking about what would be different, I guess, compared to.
yeah, like it would be nice to actually associate a characterization with him. although he does, especially there were some scenes in this episode where like Hikari was sitting on him that it gave me very very strong Appa vibes from Avatar: Last Airbender,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay, yeah.
and Appa gets a lot of characterization without talking. So,
Yeah, that's a good
but
point.
that also requires good writing.
See, that's the I don't know. For better or for worse, the various Digimon, 90% of them not talking in the show lends it its own distinct personality. I don't know how good it might be, especially in the long run, as people talk about it after it's ended and everything. But it's definitely something that you're going to hear brought up about the series. I think a long time after, it's going to be one of its more defining features.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So next question from Gigajimon22. I actually forgot that Hikari didn't have a Digivice. Oops. What did you think of Tailmon's independence and will to live up to her purpose versus Hikari's will to give her cuddles and sleep together? Felt very cat-like to me, lol. I hope it continues as a flaw for Tailmon isn't dropped after this episode.
I would love to see more of their relationship actually continue to build and have its ups and downs instead of just hopefully not just being solved in this episode. This thing I was going back to is Hikari's actual drive to do whatever she's doing in this series because, like I said, she doesn't seem to have as much I mean, surely she's a nice person. She cares about others, but she doesn't have as much drive to save the real world like Taichi and Koshiro are shooting for, and she doesn't seem overly focused on helping other Digimon the way Sora is nominally supposed to. She seems very focused on just Tailmon, and her as like a solo support in that way. If they keep playing that up, maybe they could do something interesting with it.
Yeah, like it is a very fascinating discrepancy, not discrepancy, but like contrast between Tailmon being the most set on her agenda
Mm-hmm.
and Hikari being the least interested in following up on that agenda. So like I feel like that will be an interesting dynamic to play out over the series. And yeah, I really hope that that does not just, and especially Tailmon's flaws in this episode. I hope that like it, also watching this episode made me think about. I remember like early on in the show being like in those early focus episodes being like this is great, but the one thing we're missing is flaws in these characters. And little did we know that there's a lot of other stuff that's missing as well. But but like this is the first episode. I was like, wow, this character has a clear flaw, and they learn a lesson by the end of it. And I hope that they don't just like now they learn one lesson, they never had that flaw again. I hope there's still signs of it.
No, it creates as far as just a relationship between Tailmon and Hikari, it creates an interesting kind of character dynamic. Where yeah, you have this character who is so dedicated to accomplishing their mission at the expense of their own well-being, and then another character who specifically only cares about that first character's well-being and needs to, I guess, impress upon them self-worth and learning to care about themselves a little more. And that's a really standard dual character dynamic just in basic writing and storytelling and everything, but I feel like it's not one that we've just at the moment I can't think of has been done too much with the Digimon partner dynamic, especially from with the Digimon partner being the one who's maybe a little more self-sacrificing and throwing themselves into fire after fire, and the other one has to pull them out of it. So, as with so many things, it's something they could do something with.
Yeah, I remember seeing a comment or question come in, and I guess I lost track of it. But just about how like it's great that we have this one Digimon getting so much characterization, and like it would be nice if we had other Digimon like had this like the other partner Digimon had this. Especially since we know that the other partner Digimon were originally ancient warriors or whatever, and there was that line early on where like Agumon and Gabumon knew each other before, and it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
but where did that go? What happened with that? Like,
And do they know? Like, I mean, yeah, they were all like they had this whole like reverent reaction before to Angemon's egg and the idea of Patamon, which kind of dried up a little bit after Patamon just turned into the Patamon we know and love now. And then you, with Tailmon specifically acting as a lead in a leadership role in this episode, and then they really don't do anything with Agumon or Piomon or even Patamon's relationship to. It would have been interesting to get more of a read on how they feel about Tailmon. Like, do they respect her? Do they see her as like almost a religious figure or something like that. But they barely regard her. The other Digimon barely regard her at all this episode, which is another issue of that characterization that's just kind of endemic throughout the whole thing at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so next question on a lighthearted note from Andy Lucas OE. You spoke previously about the white covering Angemon's skin. Well, Gatomon clearly has the same white because she was able to blush through it. This means either Angemon's skin is white and he's as naked as Angelmon, or digital fur can blush, which is more believable. I never thought about how like Tailmon's white looks identical to like the white on like Angemon. Looking at Angemon's design, there is like there is skin tone and then there's the white on top of the
He's
skin tone.
clearly
So
wearing
like
a
clearly,
bodysuit. That's always been my
yeah.
interpretation of his design.
So like I never thought about how Tailmon has the same white thing that is her fur.
It has to be her fur because it becomes her body, because in her evolution sequence back in the original series, she glows up and puts the Angelomon outfit on over it.
I was gonna speculate that maybe the white fabric that Angelmon and Angelwoman wear is actually made from Tailmon's fur.
And whatever the bottom part of Patamon is.
But yeah, I don't know how fur can blush, but you know she manages to
She's
because
already
she.
wearing clothes. She's wearing gloves on top of the white fur. So
And last question from at Empire Will: do you like how the series is giving an explicit mechanic for the power boost that Digimon gains from their partner via the Digivice? I think they're referring to the fact that like because we've seen it several times now where like it almost feels like a fake out of an evolution, but it's not. It's just like oh, it's just powering up, and then they get more powerful punch attack or something.
yeah, they've done that a couple of times, and this commenter talks about the idea of it, an explicit mechanic of the partner giving it to him by the Digivice, but it's something I've been kind of. I've just kind of glossed over it because it's very much, kind of a cartoon mechanic as far as things go. But the idea of it being an explicit mechanic is weird to me because we really don't see them do anything other than the partners holding their Digivice, maybe looking determined or yelling a bit, and then it just doing the glowing and giving them power thing.
Yeah, like it feels like I don't know the equivalent of like in a JRPG like they hit a critical hit and like I don't know it's not that big of a difference.
It's interesting to me because, like, obviously part of it is you want to sell the light up, glowy, noise making action of the Digivice toys. I completely understand that. I like it when the toys in Kamen Rider and Super Sentai shows make their noises and stuff too. But I guess I've just always been surprised with this show and the fact that they don't show them like hitting buttons or doing any motions or anything with them. The Digivices just kind of go on their own and do it. And I don't know if that's a budget thing. I mean, they barely managed to budget for stock evolution sequences for a couple of the characters so far. So obviously that wasn't necessarily a concern, but it's just, I mean, I agree that the Digivices being there as a power boost mechanic is a thing, but I feel like it's never been overtly portrayed in a way that, I don't know, is interesting or cool to look at is where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I feel like it almost I feel like my negative my full impression of it is negative because it's like it just feels like a fake out for an evolution and you kind of just are like when it happens I'm disappointed because I'm like oh so it's not an evolution okay great cool fine I guess and but I guess it gives that narrative tension, like because in this episode, without that, you would be like, okay, it's just the Tailmon episode. But for that brief moment, you're like, is it also the Andromon episode?
Well, that was my thing, and I was actually kind of relieved. I was like, oh, cool, they got through this episode and did their little character development thing for Tailmon, and they did it without making it the excuse for the evolution to happen as well. They actually managed to make
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just a character thing, which I thought that was kind of cool, honestly.
yeah. But I mean, the original adventure, like you're saying about like not like pressing buttons, like doing anything really explicit with them actually like using the thing as a physical device. I think adventure also treated them as like magic devices that just kind of did things for them, and I think they occasionally use them as like maps or GPS or whatever.
Oh, I mean, totally, but I don't know, I think the original ones were more. I mean, obviously the new ones are virtual pets as well, but they were less built around the light and sound action that these ones have going on, and plus, I mean, they obviously phased it down as the original adventure went on. But there was much more of a mechanic of they can't evolve whenever they can't evolve whenever they want in adventure. Uh, original recipe. For a long time there, even after they did it the first time, it was very much based on the partners either having a burst of spirit or being in distress or something like that. Whereas in this one, they just kind of hold it and say it's time to evolve, and then it glows and it goes.
Yeah. Well, getting into our final thoughts on this episode, how would you rate this episode out of 5 stylish holy rings?
I honestly would. I'm going to be generous and give it a 3 because, as I said, I was just really wowed by the presentation of the underwater society and how that felt way more like an old school setting for a Digimon episode. I like what they're doing with Tailmon, and honestly, a lot of the negatives I have are still just a lot of the same negatives I had previously, particularly with regards to characterization, how light it is for Hikari, stuff like that. But it's a persistent feature at this point, and I feel like the issues there were outshined by some of the good new stuff they put in there.
I feel like I'm hesitant on my answer because I'm gonna give it a 4, which now feels
Oh,
really
okay.
positive, but because I think that it
I could have gone for a 2.5 to pump you up even further.
but like we start off like it has so much of that creative energy jam packed in this one episode, and I'm definitely grading on a curve, right? Like I think
Oh, absolutely. I've been grading the show on a curve for since the 9th episode. It's just um well it just I mean just the energy, the setting, and like I said, and maybe it's so nice to have an episode for the first time in months that has some downtime, that has a 3-act structure to it, and isn't just a long continuous fight scene.
right, but like taking this setting and this episode plot into most other seasons, I'd be like, oh, this is the disappointing one, or this is the like,
Oh yeah, this is a 2 or a 2.5 episode in Tamers or something.
yeah. Do you have an MVP?
I do. It's Daipenmon.
Oh yes, good answer.
I love that big penguin.
Oh, that's it's like a perfect answer. I'm gonna agree. It's definitely Daitenmon. I wish he had gotten to talk and had got more to do, but just being there,
uh,
just showing up is more than enough.
Showing up, and like I said, they used him in a creative way with
Yeah, yeah.
the popsicles being the paddles. That's great. Well, let that commenter set up there. If we get more like this, I agree. Please, Toei, more like this.
All right, so looking forward to next week, episode 35, the glowing Angelmon. According to the preview, it seems like when Hikari lights Tailmon's heart with a ray of hope. That's an interesting word choice. New wings will flutter.
Translation note: Hikari means light.
But like, yeah, I'm curious if that's just like generic terminology, or like is it really going to be some kind of interplay between Takaru and Akari, that like hope triggering the light or something? I don't know.
They specifically called out Hope and Light early on in the show as the standard dichotomy that has been present in adventure since all the characters were together. And then I don't think Hikari and Takeru have said 2 words to each other since then.
Yeah, it's hard for them to have any chemistry when they don't talk at all. I'm checking now because I forget all the different Digi-Egg or Digimental combinations. Because I know
Mm.
Patamon with the Digimental of Light is Mambamon that we saw, and Patamon with the Digimental of whatever Joe's is,
Uh,
reliability or
Reliability, faithfulness.
faithfulness, yeah,
I
loyalty,
think it's.
whatever, um, is the Manta-Raymon.
Oh,
But what is all right? Wait, no. What is Tailmon with hope? Is it Goatmon? Yes, it's Goatmon. Yeah. Okay, so that's that'll be the big
the big
yeah, the
surprise
big
if.
surprise. Like, oh, once Tailmon's hit with a ray of hope, it becomes Goatmon. No Angelmon.
Says Angelon right in there, and just Angelon just there's the fake out. Koshiro gets the encyclopedia at the end of the episode, and we're doing Angelomon. The hell is Angelomon?
Oh yeah, so I'm a little bit nervous on this episode, like having enough growth to already go to Ultimate, even though we just met these characters. But I am intrigued. Like I feel like we were talking about like the glimpse we get of Skull Knightmon and Dark Knightmon haunting Tailmon. Like I want to see what that's about. I want to get more explanation of what actually happened there, how that happened.
Yeah, I'm very curious about the how on that one. It's because it is almost it's very similar to it definitely fits with Tailmon's whole thing, like she had back in the old series. The whole working with the bad guys for one reason, then being released from that, and then working with the good guys. Completely different circumstances, but it's still kind of the same I guess framework you want to call it, and the way they've done this one is just it's very different, and I'm curious as to how that story works. If it was just something as simple as Millenniumon realizing she was one of the that she's the holy Digimon and capturing her and corrupting her, it's I don't know, I want to see it.
Yeah, minor spoilers for Frontier, but one of the things that with Duskmon's reveal in Frontier that I
Hmm.
remember being really frustrated by is that like Duskmon is so cool and so intimidating, and then once Duskmon is purified, it's like that being evil meant nothing in the end, which is so like
They have like one episode they tackle where he inks about it a little bit, and Patamon talks him out of it.
yeah, it's basically just like they were completely different characters, is how I remember it. And so I'm
Hmm.
curious to see. Oh, I feel like what we've gotten, the glimpse we've gotten so far is that Dark Knightmon / Skull Knightmon had no character.
I mean, oh, that was one of my biggest frustrations with the previous episode. Is wow, this would probably mean something if we knew anything about Dark Knightmon as a character before now.
Yeah. But at least that little glimpse we got that seems like a Tailmon is haunted by, or I don't know. There's the potential for there to be some like lingering effects of that
Exactly,
thing
and
on Tailmon psyche. So that could be cool.
yeah, Litter Baker, she's already like the most, the most mature and standout one in that respect. So you can stand to make her more reflective about her past everything, especially since she has more of it compared to these other characters who haven't really dwelled on their past as Digimon at all.
Yeah. So now's when we make our bets about who's going to actually speak. And I think Hikari. So Hikari, Tailmon, they're both definitely going to speak, right? Like they got.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him to. We had whole episodes that were nominally about having Takeru do stuff, and he didn't say like two words. So.
That's true. Or like he just said Yamato or Yamete or something.
And Hikari can't even get muster a Taichi.
Yeah. um,
She'll say Tailmon.
okay, but do you think Angelmon, like at post evolution, will talk? I think so.
even the human looking Digimon don't get to talk anymore. She'll almost definitely talk. If I had to say anything, I bet you she'll have like some kind of if this is indeed a result of her getting over her trauma and guilt over being Skull Nightmon, she'll evolve and then probably make some speech about like, oh, that doesn't define me. I'm going to move forward as I am into the light, and then Celestial Arrow, whoever they're fighting at the time, and never be able to evolve into that again. We'll get Nefertimon 2 episodes later.
It is pretty disappointing thinking about like how emotionally significant that Angelmon evolution was in the original show because it was such a recurring villain.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it was a big deal. Like that's such a cool idea. Well, it's the same way. It's the same trick they pulled with Angemon in the original series too. It's like, okay, your premier evolution for this of the main cast is to defeat the big bad of this arc. So.
like I was looking up because the title of the episode, which is being translated as the Glowing Angelmon,
Mhm.
is a nod to that episode of the original show. Let me look up
Oh,
the
okay.
so like in Japanese, the original title is Kanzentai So Shingeki Kirameku Enjwoman, and that Kirameku Enjwoman is the same as the new title, this new episode, which is also Kirameku Enjwoman. The only thing
Mm-hmm.
that's different is it's written in kanji now instead of katakana.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, just reading that title, that episode, Perfects Attack Together, Sparkling Enjwoman, I was like, it like evoked all that emotion from the original show of like seeing all the perfects or ultimates attack together for the first time against Myodismon or Vandemon or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like it works so well. And anyway, I brought that all up just to say that like we're gonna get Angelmon next week against who knows what, like some random villain of the week who probably doesn't get to talk, and like that'll be disappointing.
Well, it's the same way you have like Metal Greymon against just a Mecha Tyrannomon instead of Edamon, or
Yeah, at least that felt like it was a culmination of like
it was still a culmination, especially since they didn't really. I mean, Devilmon was around, but he hadn't nearly been appeared in the capacity. And I feel like it was like almost was like with Angemon first appearing in the show and then not even really being the central combatant of his first appearance, but rather just powering up uh, Greymon and Garurumon.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know, at least Angemon will probably get to do more fighting than that.
But maybe the reason they haven't hinted at who is in that episode as the villain is because it's going to be something that surprises us, and that will be the real.
I was just thinking about that too. I was like, well, the preview didn't even like show like even a little bit who they might be fighting. So
Right, like maybe they are so upfront with the Angelomon part of it because that's the part that like we expect to be a surprise, but like no, that's not gonna be a surprise, but maybe who they're fighting is gonna be a surprise. Maybe it's Wizardmon, you know. Maybe it's just like maybe she just runs across a Wizardmon and it's like, I'm gonna murder you.
This doesn't feel significant at all. I mean, like as we said, the show just on a very base like evolutionary levels or showing off Digimon things can pull just an actual surprise out every now and then. Like that part it can do. So I would not. I was gonna say I wouldn't be surprised, but obviously I would. So I wouldn't put it past them to have, like you said, some kind of twist waiting in the wings on that one, especially with how upfront they are about the evolution happening next week.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're not setting our hopes too high, but you know, they told us that next week is a ray of hope, so. All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. Last week's Digiprompt was in honor of the Vamdemon, not Vandemon, that's Merismon. In honor of the Vedamon cult, what kind of Digimon would you want in a cult worshipping you, and why? And my favorite response came in from @Dak and Jackster on Twitter. They said Shortmon and Weddingmon, who are the cake Digimon, and
Oh,
they
okay.
said daily offerings will be mandatory, like meals, not lives necessarily. But I think if they're giving you cake, it's probably living Digimon that are cake, since they are cake Digimon. But this week's Digiprompt is in honor of Daipenmon's appearance this episode. What Digimon would you want to see as a giant pushing another city full of Digimon? Send those responses and general feedback to potages@gmail.com, to @potages on Twitter, or in the episode comments on our website, potages.com. If this is your first episode, make sure you subscribe wherever you find podcasts. Share the podcast with your friends who are reasonable enough to think that an 8-year-old girl shouldn't be on the front lines of a battlefield. And please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It only takes a minute, and each review helps a ton. I am @JeffLeJeff on social media, on Twitter mainly. You can also check out my general anime podcast, Love It a Wee Bit, where recently came out with a full review of Great Pretender, which was lots of fun and is a very mixed bag of a show.
I know. I've been just as an aside here. I did not hate the second half of Great Pretender as much as everyone else did. I had my own issues with it, and I have seen some takes about it. But I'm very interested. Just as much interest as I had in the show, I'm extremely interested in just hearing more and more other people's takes on it and their own breakdowns of it.
Cool. I was disappointed when I went to like go find podcasts and stuff talking about the show, and there was so much about the first season, and then like a lot of things that didn't cover it again when the second season came out. So it was like, it's definitely a controversial arc.
Yeah, it's been interesting to, like I said, the reactions to it have been fascinating for me to see as much as following along with the show was.
So, Chris, if people want to find you on the digital world, where can they find you?
Yes, I'm on Twitter as @bdubsprowl, and I write episode reviews for Anime News Network. Not doing Digimon anymore, but as I said, I'm doing 4 shows this season. I'm doing Skate the Infinity. I'm doing Other Side Picnic. Please watch Other Side Picnic. I'm doing, can I inhale here? Suppose a kid from the Last Dungeon Boonies moved to a starter town, and 2.47 high school boys volleyball team. So I can make most of the word counts on my reviews these days just by writing out the titles a few times.
Skate the Infinity is looks very, very good.
I do also, Skate the Infinity is like just the generally really good, easy to recommend one. Like that's what a lot of people have been talking about. It's extremely good.
It's very absurd from what I've seen so far, and
Yeah.
it seems like it's delightful fun.
Oh yeah, it's the same director as Free, and so that kind of like sports framework, but they just cranked it up to 11 because they made it about skateboarding in just the most outrageous ways possible.
Yeah, you should definitely check it out and read Chris's reviews. So thank you everyone for listening. I'll be back next week to talk about episode 35, The Glowing Angelomon. Bye!
Bye!
And remember, never stop digivolving.